One of the most important signature dolls of Emile Jumeau, the Jumeau firm, was their doll, which we know today as the Jumeau Triste. Triste, the French word for sad, referring to the description of the doll, looking like a very peaceful yet wistful child with a sad face. This is not a name that Jumeau used at all. He simply referred to this as his bébé in cassab once again, but a very distinctive portrait-type model. This was sculpted for him by the French sculptor Carrier-Belleuse. And if any of you have been to Paris and have gone, for example, into the old Garnier Opera House, you'll see statues there that were done by Carrier-Belleuse, very, very famous sculptor of the 1870, 1880 period in Paris. And Jumeau, who ran in all of these art circles of the time, commissioned him to design this wonderful model for him. And it was truly the signature doll of the Jumeau firm, and it is an extraordinary doll because it is this idealistic child, as I read to you before, but also there's personality here, there's character. It's just wonderful. The doll was made for a period of almost 10 years, one of the longest models that was made by the Jumeau firm, and so you will find it in various different types of decoration and painting, the later period being much more dramatic with much more highly defined features, and this earlier period, such as this example, being done with what I just showed you in the portrait Jumeaus, very, very delicate bisque, delicate painting, the rose, look at the rose blushing on the eyelid, very, very typical of the earlier period of the Bébé Triste. The Triste achieved part of its look from a very heavy upper eyelid. The upper eyelid is sculpted to be very, very heavy and almost dreamy looking, and that helped it achieve its look. A very wonderful little rounded nose tip, and then the slightly downcast lips. This is a beautiful example with a wonderful mohair wig and her wonderful, I think, original antique costume, certainly, if not original from the Jumeau factory, original from costumes that could have been purchased in department stores or doll shops at the time. This wonderful hat is just pretty extraordinary, very delicately rose blushed bonnet, wonderful. And with her parasol with not the typical dog head handle, but a duck head handle. Very, very lovely, beautiful leather shoes. The Bébé Triste was made in sizes 9 to 16. Our Rose girl, Bébé Rose over here, is a size 13, a very desirable size. But the smallest size in which the Jumeau Triste was made was the size 9, of which this is an example that I'm right here in the brown dress. Now this doll was one of the rarest sizes to find. The larger sizes, 11 and 12, seem to have been the most popular. To find it in a 9 is a bonus right away, just because there weren't that many made. But to find it with this quality of bisque, with this incredible original Jumeau costume that I want to turn around. And when I do, not only look at the costume, but please also look at that gorgeous wig, those beautiful curls that are just kind of tumbling onto her shoulders. The costume has this wonderful detail with the silk lining and the turquoise piping around the sides, and then the silk file ribbons at the front and on her shoulder. A very, very beautiful doll to find, and with her original aqua heavy knit stockings and her signed Jumeau shoes. Wonderful. Every collection needs to have, if you could pick out 10 pivotal dolls in the world that every collection should have, I would say Bébé Triste would rank right up toward the top of that. About the same time that Jumeau was introducing his early dolls, he introduced a doll that was marked with the initials EJ and then the letter A. Extremely rare doll to find, and probably the earliest version of his doll that I'm going to show you in a moment, that was the doll marked with his initials, EJ. But this, although it looks exactly like the EJA model, is not an EJ. It's a doll that was made by the Schmidt et Fils company. And in the Jumeau book, we have a section devoted to this to talk about this extraordinary situation. The Schmidt and the EJA, this particular model of Schmidt, of which there are only 3 models of Schmidts that are known, the round face, the pear face, and this one, which is kind of pear-faced, but not really. It looks exactly like the Jumeau model of EJA. And what could the background of this be? We don't know. So those of you who are looking to find new research in doll history all the time, here's well, maybe it's not important in the overall scheme of the world, but it's important to doll collectors, and we like to do this kind of research, find out what happened at this particular point, because these dolls are so rare. The Schmidt with his face and the EJA, and they look exactly alike. Now, I brought some things I wanted to show you, some different elements of doll study. I wanted to show you, this is an original Jumeau wig, and you can see in this how it was made with a muslin cap below, or not a muslin, but like a canvas cap below, and then these various pieces of hair that are sewn on in these corded rows. And I'm going to turn it over for you to see. And you can see here on the front of it how it was done. And then when you look inside, this is a very, very typical inside of the cap, and look for that center medallion of hair at the inside. And those are one of the signs if you have an original Jumeau hat. You might also find, and I'm going to talk to you about this in a minute because it's quite interesting, sometimes you will find on the inside of the wig, you will find a pencil lettered number that will tell you, and this one is 6. So this would have belonged on the head of a size 6 Bébé Jumeau. The more Jumeau worked along, starting about 1884, 1885, everything became uniform in the sizes of the dolls. This was really important because he was making shoes, he was making eyes, he was making wigs, he was making dresses, he was making boxes. So he had to have uniform sized dolls. And so when you can find them all original in their size, it's very good. A funny thing happened though, because he made everything uniform, a lot of people came along and said, well, okay, now that's a uniform size, so we can make dresses for size 8 Bébé Jumeau. If you look in the Paris department stores at that time, you will find, not from the Jumeau factory, but made by small studios around Paris, costumes, and in the advertising of the store it will say, costumes for Bébé Jumeau, but they were not from Jumeau, but they would fit perfectly. And you know, you see the same thing today with the American Girl dolls. You can look up open up a Christmas catalog from a general store, and you'll see costumes for 18-inch child dolls. And you know that they have positioned those costumes to fit the popular American Girl doll, but not made by American Girl. I'm just digressing. Now, on shoes, Jumeau started to make their own shoes, and I wanted to show you some of them. This is a very, very beautiful pair of rose covered in silk shoes, which they did with the little silk bows. And on the bottom, you can see, I hope the camera can come in on this because it's incised and it's kind of hard to get, but they say Bébé Jumeau déposé. So at the time that he finally deposed his doll, beginning about 1884, he really became concerned with having marks on everything. So he would put the shoes that he was making would be stamped Bébé Jumeau déposé, and up on top, the size of the doll that it belonged on. He made his little EJ model, which we're going to show you. This is a darling pair, and they are size 1. So he made shoes right from the tiniest size right up to the largest size. And here his very classic design of the black outer shoe with the cord stitching around the side in brown, and then the little brown either bows or buckles. And this was really important because you could use this with many, many different style costumes, and they weren't just a black or a brown shoe. And they have on the bottom the little stamp, EJ, and the number 1. They're wonderful. I know some people that just collect the shoes because they think they're so great. And then the classic shoe that came along beginning about 1890 was his shoes simply marked Paris Déposé with the imprint of the royal bee, which he took as his signature imprint. And so if you can't tell it's a bee, that's a bee on there. And again, the size number of the doll. And if you look at the shoe, you will see again it's the black with the brown overcast stitching and the brown bow. So different types. He made shoes on some of his more luxury costumes. He made shoes in a particular color to match that costume. I talked to you about the eyes. The earlier eyes were the spiral threaded that we talked about. He then perfected his system that he called the human eye. We call the paperweight eye. And I wanted to bring you in a pair of eyes that are still set in their original plaster that are the paperweight eyes. And I hope the camera can pick it up from the side angle so you can see that crystalline, bulbous, paperweight-like effect over the top. The eyes at this time tended to lose the really, really fine spiral threading, but having the paperweight crystalline drop gave them a great depth that makes them really just gorgeous at times. And then finally, beginning about 1882, Jumeau started to string his dolls. I wanted to show you this with a spiral spring mechanism. And this would be connecting the head and the torso, this particular spiral spring mechanism. And that's why it was so perfected and so good, which is the reason that so many Jumeau dolls do not have to be restrung these days. They've held over for 125 years, well, going on 140 years. They've held their stringing because this mechanism was so perfectly devised. On the very earlier Jumeau bébés, you won't find this. You'll find a little wooden button. Okay, now I really feel short because I am standing next to an extraordinarily rare Jumeau bébé. It is the EJ model by Jumeau when he introduced the doll with his initials impressed on the back of the head, EJ. And the model was made in many sizes, starting with size 1, which I'll show you, right on up to this, the rarest size known, the size 16. What is really special about this doll is not only is it this extraordinary size 16, well, next, I mean, it's just plain beautiful. That's pretty big thing, too, because a large size, they really could capture the modeling. But also the doll is wearing its totally original costume from the Jumeau factory, a very, very important feature. Wonderful doll with her original rose or coral dress. You can see it's faded, it's frail, but this is original. And please, you're not allowed to take this doll. You're not allowed to have this doll unless you keep this costume on her because it is so extraordinary. With the wonderful luxury details of this crystal beading, the little silk rosettes with the silver beading, tinsel falling off of that. Extraordinary Alisson lace trim. And let me turn it around and show you the back with the long tails of the dress cascading over the skirt and having more of these wonderful rosettes and the crystal beading down the back. Absolutely an extraordinary costume. And even her wig, although it needs the loving care of someone who can perfect it just a bit, this is her original Jumeau wig. As I showed you in the wig before, it has the original cap inside, and hand-lettered inside is the number 16. And to top it off, she has a beautiful velvet bonnet, and what you can only dream to find at times, her original Jumeau shoes signed to match the costume, and signed Jumeau shoes. Just an extraordinary, a great, great find. And I'm happy to say that the EJ bébé, the bébés marked EJ, came in more my size dolls. So here we have a wonderful selection of 4 of them that are from the collection at the Waldorf Astoria. And the first one I'm showing here with this wonderful blue velvet bonnet, which was this extravagant bonnet, is the type of bonnet that Jumeau tried to present on their dolls because it really formed like a frame to their face and was very, very important. And on this doll, I want you to notice the eyes once again, and I'm going to turn her sideways so you can see these are the eyes that I just showed you outside of, not the pair of eyes, but the type of eyes that I just showed you a short time ago in their original plaster, and here they are in the doll, and you can see how very, very deep they are. By this time, Jumeau has perfected his eyes. Remember, by the mid-1880s, Jumeau had their own complete factory in Montreuil. This was exceptional. No one else had this at all in France. And in this factory, they did everything from pouring the bisque to make the heads. They made all of the bodies, both the composition and the wood parts, because they were 2 separate operations. They made the eyes there. They made the wigs there. They even made the spiral spring for the neck that I showed you a moment ago. The wigs, the boxes, the costumes, everything was made in that one factory. This made them stand apart from any other manufacturer of dolls in France at the time. And that's why they were able to get this overall consistency that they were seeking in their dolls. So a very beautiful example of the EJ Bébé made with Jumeau's stylized blue paperweight eyes. On the other side, her other tall sister has the rarer brown eyes. And the brown eyes came in various shades, from very, very deep brown to like an almond or hazel brown color. Very, very delicate with not almond, but amber. A lot of gold showing through. And again, you as a collector decide what you like. The brown eyes tend to be a much more dramatic doll, even though the painting on this EJ is very, very delicate with softly blushed, mauve blushing on the upper eyelids. Mauve blushing is a little bit earlier than the rose blushing if you're looking at your dolls trying to decide on different things, just to know that they kind of moved down into doing the rose by the early 1880s. Very, very lovely doll with a beautiful mohair wig and a wonderful bonnet. I want you to take a minute and look at this bonnet. And I am going to show you her shoes, which once again, these are not Jumeau shoes. Now, the doll was probably redressed by the child later from one of the wonderful costumes that would have been available to her from the Paris department stores. And here we have the Jumeau type shoes, again black, and these have a wonderful brown silk rosette on the top, and they have the signature of the maker on the bottom, one of the many makers who were involved in doll shoes at that time. Size 3, EJ. Bébé Jumeau, EJ, size 3, and she is wearing her totally original dress and bonnet. And this is so desirable. First of all, the size is highly desirable. There are many collectors that are just looking for what they call these small cabinet dolls, ranging from 0 or less than 0 up to size 3. And they'll have a whole little family of them, and they're just wonderful to see. When you can find one in her original dress and bonnet like this, that is truly exceptional. And then take a look at the eyes once again. Jumeau has perfected that paperweight eye, and it is so deep and so dramatic. These are absolutely extraordinary. Just a wonderful, wonderful doll all the way around. And finally, little size 1. Is she wonderful? Look at her, size 1 EJ Bébé. And she has, look at her shoes. She has the original signed Jumeau shoes.